The crack of bone echoed across the dusty ranch yard, followed by Ellie's piercing scream that tore through the peaceful afternoon like a bullet. Preston Forrester dropped the fence post he'd been setting and sprinted toward his 8-year-old son, who clutched his right arm, face contorted in agony. "Illy, what happened?" Preston fell to his knees beside the boy, dust clouding around them both. "The horse," Illy gasped between sobs. "I tried to get on Thunder by myself. I fell." His small body trembled with pain, face pale beneath his sun-browned skin. Preston gently examined the arm, his stomach sinking at the unnatural angle. "It's broken, son. We need to get you to town." He scooped Illy up, mindful of the injury, and carried him toward the wagon. The year was 1878, and Fort Stanton, New Mexico Territory, lay 10 miles east of their modest ranch. Preston had carved this homestead from the unforgiving land 3 years ago, after losing his wife Emma to childbed fever with their second son. The baby hadn't survived either, leaving just Preston and Illy to weather the harsh realities of the frontier together. "Pa, it hurts something awful," Illy whimpered as Preston settled him in the wagon. "I know, son. We'll get you fixed up." Preston harnessed their steadiest mare to the wagon with practiced speed, his hands moving automatically while his mind raced. He hadn't slept properly in days, working dawn to dusk and beyond to keep the ranch afloat. Now this. The ride into Fort Stanton jostled Illy painfully, despite Preston's careful driving. The boy had stopped crying, but his small face was pinched with pain, eyes squeezed shut against each bump in the rutted trail. Preston steered the wagon directly to Doc Miller's office on the edge of town, but found the place locked tight with a hastily scrawled note. "Gone to Socorro. Back in 3 days." "Damnation," Preston muttered, immediately regretting the curse when Illy looked up at him with tear-filled eyes. "What do we do now, Pa?" Preston thought quickly. "Mrs. Davis might help. She knows about healing." Tabitha Davis had arrived in Fort Stanton barely 8 months ago, a young widow with healing skills who'd taken over the general store after her husband's death. Preston had exchanged only necessary pleasantries with her during his infrequent trips to town for supplies. She seemed kind enough, if somewhat reserved, with her honey-brown hair always neatly pinned, and her voice soft but firm. Preston guided the wagon to the general store, relief washing over him when he saw the open sign in the window. He gathered Illy carefully in his arms and shouldered his way through the door. The bell above the door jangled, announcing their entrance. Tabitha looked up from her ledger, her professional smile quickly fading when she saw the injured child. "Mr. Forrester, what's happened?" She hurried around the counter, already rolling up her sleeves. Illy fell from a horse, his arms broken. "Doc Miller's away." Preston's words came out clipped with worry. Tabitha didn't hesitate. "Bring him to the back room." She led them through the store to her living quarters behind it. "Set him on the table there." The back room was neat and spare, with herbs hanging from the ceiling beams and bottles of various remedies lined on shelves. A small wood stove provided warmth against the early spring chill. "I'm not a doctor," Tabitha warned as she gathered supplies, "but I've set bones before. My father was a physician in Pennsylvania before the war. Do what you can, please." Preston stood helplessly by as she examined Illy's arm with gentle, confident hands. "It's a clean break," she told them both after her examination. "That's good news, young man. You'll heal well." She smiled at Illy, whose tears had slowed somewhat under her calm attention. "Will it hurt more?" Illy asked, his voice small. "Setting it will hurt," Tabitha admitted honestly, "but after that it will start feeling better." She turned to Preston. "I need to pull the arm to align the bone, then splint it. I'll need your help holding him steady." Preston nodded grimly and moved to brace his son. Tabitha prepared a small dose of laudanum in water, which Ellie drank with a grimace. "This will help with the pain," she explained, waiting several minutes for it to take effect before proceeding. When she judged the moment right, Tabitha took hold of Ellie's arm. "Ready, on 3. 1, 2. She pulled firmly on 2 instead of 3, and the bones snapped back into alignment with a sickening sound. Ellie's scream pierced Preston's heart. He held his son firmly while Tabitha quickly splinted the arm with practiced efficiency, wrapping it securely with clean bandages. "There now," she soothed when she'd finished. "The worst is over." She wiped tears from Ellie's flushed cheeks with a cool cloth. Preston finally released the breath he'd been holding. "Thank you, Mrs. Davis. Please call me Tabitha." She smoothed back Ellie's dark hair from his forehead. "He should rest now. The laudanum will make him sleepy." Ellie was indeed already drowsing, the trauma and medicine taking their toll. Preston looked at his son's pale face, then back at Tabitha, uncertain. "You can leave him here on my bed for a bit," she offered, gesturing to the small bedroom visible through an open door. "I'll watch over him while you take care of whatever business you have in town." Preston hesitated. "I need to get back to the ranch." "The cattle will survive a few hours without you," Tabitha interrupted firmly. She studied his face more carefully. "When did you last sleep properly, Mr. Forrester?" "Preston," he corrected automatically. Then he shrugged. "Sleep's a luxury these days." Tabitha helped him carry Ellie to her bed, tucking the boy in with motherly care that made Preston's throat tighten unexpectedly. When they returned to the main room, she fixed him with a stern look. "Your son will heal, Preston, but he needs you well too. You look ready to drop." Her directness startled him. "I'm fine," he insisted. "You're not. You're exhausted." She poured coffee from a pot keeping warm on the stove and pressed it into his hands. "Drink this. Then tell me what's got you working yourself into an early grave." The rich aroma hit him first, making him realize how long it had been since he'd had decent coffee. He took a grateful sip before answering. "Spring roundup's coming. Fences need mending after winter. Fields need plowing. And I'm doing it alone since my ranch hand quit last month." The words tumbled out, admitting more than he'd intended. Tabitha listened thoughtfully. "No family nearby to help, none." He stared into his coffee. "It's just Ellie and me since my wife passed." "I'm sorry for your loss," she said softly. Something in her voice made him look up, and he recognized the shadow of similar pain in her eyes. "Your husband?" he asked. "Typhoid. Last summer in Santa Fe." Her reply was simple but carried the weight of fresh grief. "We'd only been married 2 years when I lost Thomas." Preston nodded, understanding passing between them. "After I couldn't bear staying there," Tabitha continued. "This store came up for sale and Fort Stanton seemed far enough away from memories, yet close enough to civilization." She smiled faintly. "Though I sometimes wonder about my definition of civilization now." That pulled a rare chuckle from Preston. "You get used to it, do you?" she asked, arching an eyebrow. "I still find myself startled by the occasional gunfire on Saturday nights. That's just cowboys letting off steam." "So I've been told." Repeatedly. Her dry tone suggested she remained unconvinced. For the first time in months, Preston felt the tension in his shoulders ease slightly. There was something about Tabitha's calm competence and gentle humor that felt like drawing a full breath after being underwater too long. The bell from the store jangled, interrupting the moment. Tabitha stood. "Rest here while I see to that. I'll check on Ellie when I'm done." Left alone, Preston felt the exhaustion she'd noted sweep over him. He fought against heavy eyelids, but the combination of the warm room, decent coffee, and the relief of having Ellie cared for conspired against him. When Tabitha returned 15 minutes later, she found him slumped in the chair, fast asleep. She studied him for a moment, the weather-beaten face relaxed in sleep, the strong hands that worked too hard, the dark hair in need of a trim. She fetched a blanket and gently draped it over him, careful not to wake him. "You'll heal too," she whispered, echoing the promise she'd made to his son. "But first, you need to rest." Preston woke disoriented as afternoon light slanted through unfamiliar windows. For a moment, panic seized him, but then he remembered where he was. He bolted upright, the blanket someone had placed over him falling to his lap. "Illy," he called, getting to his feet. "In here, Pa." His son's voice, though weak, came from the bedroom. Preston found Tabitha sitting beside the bed, reading to Illy from a book of adventure stories. "You're awake," she said, closing the book. "You needed that sleep." Preston ran a hand through his hair, embarrassed. "I didn't mean to impose. How long was I out?" "About 3 hours. "Hardly enough, but it's a start." She stood, marking her place in the book. "Illy's fever has stayed down, which is good. I've given him some willow bark tea for the pain." "Can we go home now, Pa?" Illy asked, his splinted arm resting carefully on a pillow. Preston looked uncertainly at Tabitha, who nodded. "He can travel, but he'll need to keep the arm still. I'll make up a sling." "I don't know how to thank you," Preston said as she gathered supplies. "No need for thanks. That's what neighbors do." She fashioned a sling from a length of clean cotton. "But I do have one condition." Preston tensed slightly, waiting. "You must promise to bring Illy back in 1 week so I can check the setting." Her eyes, warm amber in the afternoon light, met his. "And you must get some help on that ranch before you work yourself to death." "What good would that do, Illy?" Her bluntness caught him off guard again, but he couldn't argue with her logic. "I'll try." "Do more than try." She helped Illy sit up, gently fitting the sling around his neck and settling his arm into it. "There. How does that feel?" "Better, madam," Illy said politely. "Thank you for fixing me." Her smile transformed her face, bringing a glow that made Preston suddenly aware of how young she actually was, perhaps 25 or 26, not much younger than his own 30 years. "You're very welcome, Illy. You were very brave." She turned to Preston. "I've packed some medicine for pain and some salve for bruising. Instructions are written down." Preston reached for his wallet, but she waved him off. "We can settle accounts later. Get your boy home before dark." He wanted to insist on paying her now, but something in her expression stopped him. Instead, he helped Illy carefully to his feet. "Wait," Tabitha said suddenly. She disappeared into the store, returning moments later with a paper-wrapped package. "Penny candy," she explained, handing it to Illy with a conspirator's smile. "Medicine works better with something sweet, I always say." Illy's face lit up. "Thank you, Mrs. Davis. You're welcome." She walked them to their wagon, helping Preston settle Illy comfortably on the seat. "Remember, 1 week," she reminded Preston. "Sooner if there's fever or increased pain." "Yes, madam," Preston promised, tipping his hat. "We're in your debt." "Nonsense. Just take care of each other." She stepped back, watching as they pulled away. Preston glanced back once to see her still standing there, hand raised in farewell, her figure growing smaller as the wagon carried them home. The following week passed in a blur of work and worry for Preston. Illy's arm pained him, though the boy tried bravely not to complain. Preston did his best to keep up with ranch work while caring for his son, but he felt himself falling further behind each day. On the 6th day, he hitched the wagon for their promised return visit to Tabitha. Illy, despite his discomfort, seemed eager for the trip. "You think Mrs. Davis will have more stories to read?" he asked as they set out. "Maybe." Preston was distracted, mentally calculating how much work awaited his return. "I like her," Illy declared. "She's nice and pretty." Preston glanced at his son in surprise. "Is she now? Don't you think so, Pa?" The question made Preston uncomfortably aware that he had, indeed, found himself thinking of Tabitha's warm eyes and gentle hands more often than was proper this past week. "She seems a fine woman," he replied neutrally. "Ma would have liked her," Illy said with the simple certainty of childhood. Preston fell silent, struck by the observation. Emma had been gone 3 years, but sometimes the loss still felt raw. He'd thrown himself into the ranch, into raising Illy, allowing himself no time to dwell on loneliness. But lately, Fort Stanton appeared on the horizon, saving him from his thoughts. The town had grown considerably in recent years, boasting several saloons, a hotel, a bank, and various businesses catering to the mix of soldiers, ranchers, and travelers passing through. The military fort that gave the town its name stood a mile away, its presence providing some security in these still wild territories. Preston steered the wagon directly to the general store. A small crowd gathered outside made him frown, unusual for a weekday morning. As they drew closer, he realized something was wrong. Raised voices carried on the wind. "Have no right," a man shouted. "This store belongs to men who built this town." Preston recognized the voice of Harold Jenkins, owner of the saloon across the street and a notorious bully. He pulled the wagon to a stop, warning Illy to stay put while he investigated. Pushing through the small crowd, he found Jenkins confronting Tabitha on the store's porch. Her face was calm, but Preston saw the tension in her rigid posture. "This store belongs to me, Mr. Jenkins," Tabitha replied evenly. "I purchased it fairly, from an outsider who had no right to sell it." Jenkins's face was flushed with anger, or more likely, early morning whiskey. "My brother had claim to this property first." "Your brother abandoned his claim when he left town 2 years ago," Tabitha countered. "The property was legally transferred twice since then. Take your grievance to the territorial court if you must, but stop harassing my customers." Jenkins advanced a threatening step. "You uppity Eastern women think you can come out here, and that's enough, Jenkins." Preston stepped forward, positioning himself between them. Jenkins sneered. "Stay out of this, Forrester, ain't your concern. Mrs. Davis is treating my boy's broken arm. That makes it my concern." Preston kept his voice level but firm. "She's right. Take it to court if you have a legitimate claim." Jenkins glared, calculating his odds against the taller, younger rancher. Finally, he spat in the dirt. "This ain't over," he threatened before stalking away toward his saloon. The small crowd dispersed, and Preston turned to Tabitha. "Are you all right?" "Fine." Her voice was steady, but he noticed her hands trembling slightly. "Thank you for intervening. Jenkins makes these claims every few months, usually when he's deep in his cups. Has he threatened you before?" "Nothing I can't handle." She straightened her apron. "Come in. I'm eager to see how Illy's arm is healing." Preston helped Illy down from the wagon, noticing how the boy's eyes had widened at the confrontation. Inside the store, Tabitha's professional demeanor returned as she examined the arm carefully. "The swelling has gone down nicely," she reported. "The bone is aligning well. Another 5 weeks in the splint should see it healed, though he'll need to be careful for some time after." 5 weeks. Illy groaned. "I'm afraid so." Tabitha smiled sympathetically. "But you can do more with it now that the initial healing has begun. Just no climbing on horses without help," she added with mock sternness. "Yes, madam." Illy looked appropriately chastened. "I have something for you." She reached under the counter and pulled out a small wooden figure of a horse. "I thought you might like this while your arm heals. It's safer than the real thing for now." Illy's face lit up as he accepted the gift with his good hand. "Thank you. Pa, look." Preston examined the finely carved figure. "That's mighty generous, Mrs. Davis. Mr. Chen from the laundry carves them. I traded some mending for it." She smiled at Ellie's obvious delight. "Now, why don't you sit over there and look at that horse while your father and I discuss your care?" Ellie obediently took his treasure to a chair by the window, and Tabitha led Preston to the counter. "He's healing well," she said quietly, "but I'm concerned about you." "Have you found help for the ranch?" Preston sighed. "Not yet. No one wants to work that far out for what I can afford to pay." "You can't continue alone." Her concern seemed genuine, making him uncomfortable with its intimacy. "I've managed so far." "Barely from the looks of you," she frowned. "What happens if you get injured too? What becomes of Ellie then?" The blunt question struck like a physical blow. It was the fear that kept him working through exhaustion, the knowledge that his son depended entirely on him. "I don't have much choice," he admitted. Tabitha considered him thoughtfully. "Perhaps we can help each other." "How so?" "I need protection from Jenkins and his ilk. They see a woman alone as easy prey." She gestured toward the store around them. "Business is good, but I'm vulnerable. Jenkins won't be the last to try intimidation." "And I need help," Preston finished, seeing where she was heading. "Precisely. I propose a trade. I'll come to your ranch 3 days a week to help with Ellie and whatever household tasks need doing. In exchange, you'll spend those same days here in town, making your presence known as my business associate." Preston weighed the offer. "That's a long ride for you." "I have a good horse. And I don't mind the journey." She met his gaze steadily. "It would be good for Ellie to have someone checking his arm regularly, and perhaps good for me to get away from town occasionally." The arrangement made practical sense, yet Preston hesitated. Having a young, unmarried woman at his ranch would stir gossip. Then again, Tabitha's status as a widow gave her slightly more freedom than unmarried girls enjoyed. "People will talk," he warned. "People always talk," she shrugged. "We'll give them nothing to substantiate rumors. This is a business arrangement between neighbors." "For how long?" "Until Ellie's arm is fully healed. 6 weeks, perhaps. By then, you should be through the busiest season and able to hire help." Preston considered the proposition from all angles. The truth was, he desperately needed the help, and Tabitha clearly needed protection from Jenkins's intimidation. "All right," he agreed finally, "but I insist on paying you something for Ellie's treatment. Save your money for that ranch hand you'll hire eventually." She extended her hand to seal the deal. "Partners." Her handshake was firm, her palm warm against his calloused one. "Partners," he agreed, and so began an arrangement that would change both their lives in ways neither could have anticipated. Tabitha arrived at the Forrester ranch the following Tuesday morning, riding a sturdy bay mare and carrying saddlebags filled with medical supplies and fresh provisions. Preston had spent the previous day cleaning the small ranch house as best he could, acutely aware of its shabby condition through an imagined woman's eyes. "Welcome to Circle F," he greeted her, helping her dismount. Tabitha surveyed the modest homestead, a 2-room cabin with a lean-to kitchen, a barn, corral, and various outbuildings scattered across the property. In the distance, rolling grassland stretched toward mountains blue with distance. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. "You have a beautiful piece of land here. It's rough, but it's home." He led her inside where Ellie waited eagerly. "Mrs. Davis." The boy jumped up from the table where he'd been struggling to write with his left hand. "I've been practicing writing like you said. Very good." She examined his awkward script with genuine approval. "That's excellent progress. Left-handed writing is difficult." The small cabin felt suddenly brighter with her presence. Preston watched as she immediately set to checking Ellie's arm, then producing a fresh baked apple cake from her saddlebags that made his son's eyes widen with delight. "I thought I might bake while I'm here," she explained to Preston. "Your oven looks serviceable." "I wouldn't know," he admitted. I can manage biscuits and beans, but not much more. Tabitha smiled. Then prepare for improvement in your meals, at least on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays. She wasted no time making herself useful. While Preston prepared to ride into town, Tabitha rolled up her sleeves and assessed the state of his household. By the time he departed, she had bread dough rising, laundry soaking, and was teaching Ellie to read from a book she'd brought. In Fort Stanton, Preston made his presence known, spending time at Tabitha's store, helping customers with heavier items, and making minor repairs she'd neglected. He took lunch at the hotel restaurant where he could be seen by townspeople, and made a point of nodding cordially to Jenkins when their paths crossed. By late afternoon, he returned to the ranch to find transformation underway. Clean laundry hung on the line, the cabin smelled of fresh bread and stew, and Ellie was happily whittling a stick under Tabitha's watchful eye. "You've worked miracles," Preston said, genuinely impressed. "Hardly miracles. Just a woman's touch." Tabitha brushed flour from her apron. "I've left stew for your supper and bread for the morning. Ellie's exercises for his arm are written down. He should do them twice daily." Their new routine quickly established itself. On her days at the ranch, Tabitha brought order to Preston's chaotic household. She mended clothes, prepared foods that could last several days, taught Ellie his letters, and checked his healing arm. On Preston's days in town, he became a visible ally for Tabitha, deterring further harassment from Jenkins while helping her business thrive. The arrangement was strictly professional, both of them careful to maintain proper distance. Yet as weeks passed, something shifted imperceptibly between them. For Preston, it began with finding himself looking forward to Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Saturdays with unexpected eagerness. He caught himself watching Tabitha as she worked, the graceful efficiency of her movements, the gentle patience she showed Ellie, the quiet competence she brought to every task. For Tabitha, it was noticing the way Preston's eyes crinkled when he truly smiled, a rare event that became less rare as weeks passed. It was appreciating his unwavering devotion to his son, his quiet strength, and the glimpses of dry humor that occasionally broke through his reserved exterior. On her fourth visit, Tabitha arrived to find Preston struggling with account books at the kitchen table, frustration evident in his furrowed brow. "Trouble?" she asked, setting down her bags. He ran a hand through his hair. "Numbers were never my strong suit. Emma handled the books." Tabitha hesitated only briefly before offering, "I could help. I manage my store accounts." His pride warred visibly with practicality before he nodded. "I'd be grateful." She pulled up a chair beside him, their shoulders nearly touching as she reviewed his ledgers. The proximity brought a warmth to her cheeks that had nothing to do with the spring day. "Your system just needs organization," she told him after reviewing the scattered entries. "Here, let me show you." They worked side by side for an hour, Tabitha explaining basic bookkeeping principles while Preston absorbed her teaching with the same intensity he brought to all tasks. When they finished, he had a clear picture of his finances for the first time in years, and the news wasn't good. "I'm barely breaking even," he admitted, staring at the columns of figures. "But you have options," Tabitha pointed out. "Your cattle breeding stock is excellent. Focus there instead of trying to maintain such large herds, quality over quantity." "That's what Emma always said." The words slipped out before he could stop them. She was right. Tabitha's voice was gentle. "Tell me about her." The question startled him. He rarely spoke of Emma, finding the memories too painful, but something in Tabitha's quiet interest invited confidence. She was strong, smart, stubborn as a mule when she believed in something. A faint smile touched his lips. "She grew up on a farm in Kansas, knew more about cattle than I did when we married. She's the one who pushed me to start this ranch. She sounds remarkable. She was. Preston turned the pencil in his fingers. Your husband, Thomas, was it? What was he like? It was Tabitha's turn to be surprised by the personal question. Kind, she said after a moment. Idealistic. He was a schoolteacher with dreams of establishing schools throughout the territories. That's why we came west. Her voice softened with memory. He believed education could solve most of the world's problems. A noble thought. Yes, she traced a pattern on the account book. We were only married 2 years when typhoid took him. Sometimes it feels like a dream, our time together. So brief. I understand, Preston said quietly. 3 years with Emma sometimes feels the same way, like something I imagined. Their eyes met in shared understanding the peculiar loneliness of young widowhood, of futures abruptly rewritten. In that moment, something passed between them, a recognition that transcended their careful boundaries. Ellie's entrance broke the spell. Pa, Mrs. Davis, come see what I found in the barn. They followed him outside, the moment's intimacy fading but not forgotten. As April gave way to May, the land greened with spring's promise. Ellie's arm healed steadily, and he regained more mobility each week. Preston, with Tabitha's guidance, implemented changes to his ranching operation that promised better returns. Tabitha's business thrived under their arrangement, her store becoming known for fair prices and reliable goods. The practical partnership functioned smoothly, but beneath it ran an undercurrent of growing affection neither acknowledged openly. Small gestures betrayed them, Preston bringing wildflowers he'd gathered for Tabitha's table, Tabitha packing Preston's favorite apple cake when she knew he'd had a difficult week. They maintained propriety scrupulously. Preston never stayed at Tabitha's store after dark. Tabitha always departed the ranch before sunset, yet rumors inevitably circulated through Fort Stanton about the widow and the rancher. People are talking, Tabitha admitted one Thursday as Preston prepared to ride into town. Mrs. Whitman asked me directly yesterday if we had an understanding. What did you tell her? Preston kept his tone neutral despite the sudden pounding of his heart. That we have a business arrangement while Ellie's arm heals. She adjusted her bonnet, not meeting his eyes. She didn't believe me, of course. Preston cleared his throat. Ellie's arm is nearly healed. Yes. The single word hung between them, pregnant with unasked questions. Our arrangement was for 6 weeks, he continued carefully. It was. Next Saturday will be 6 weeks. Tabitha nodded, still focused on her bonnet strings. I've been thinking about that, perhaps. Perhaps we should consider whether the arrangement has served its purpose. The suggestion squeezed Preston's chest uncomfortably, though he knew it was the proper thing to propose. Their agreement had been temporary by design. Jenkins hasn't bothered you lately, he noted. No. Your presence has been effective. She finally looked up. And your household is in better order now. An awkward silence fell between them. In the distance, Ellie could be heard talking to the chickens as he scattered feed, his splinted arm now causing him little hindrance. I should go, Preston said finally. Don't want to be late opening the store. No. Tabitha's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. People count on routine. He rode to town troubled by a sense of impending loss he hadn't anticipated when they'd first struck their bargain. The thought of returning to life without Tabitha's regular presence left him feeling hollow in a way he hadn't expected. In town, Preston opened the store and helped the first customers of the day. By mid-morning, business slowed, and he found himself absently rearranging items on shelves, lost in thought. The door opened, bell jangling to announce a visitor. Preston looked up to find Harold Jenkins entering, his usual swagger tempered by unusual sobriety. Forrester, Jenkins greeted him with a curt nod. Jenkins. Preston tensed, ready for trouble. To his surprise, Jenkins removed his hat, a gesture of respect rarely seen from the man. Got a moment to talk? Man to man, curiosity overcame caution. What about, Mrs. Davis? Jenkins glanced around the empty store. And you, Preston crossed his arms, speak your piece. I've come to apologize. The words seemed to cost Jenkins considerable effort. My behavior toward the widow was unbecoming. Suspicion kept Preston silent, waiting for more. The truth is, Jenkins continued, twisting his hat in his hands, I've had my eye on her business, not her property claim. Stores turning a good profit under her management. And, Preston prompted when Jenkins paused, and I thought intimidation might convince her to sell to me. Jenkins had the grace to look embarrassed. It was wrong. My late wife would have boxed my ears for it. Preston studied the man, looking for deception but finding what appeared to be genuine remorse. Why tell me this? Jenkins looked him directly in the eye. Because it's clear to everyone in town that you care for the widow, and she for you. The blunt assessment startled Preston into silence. I won't trouble her again, Jenkins promised, and I'll make it known that anyone who does answers to me as well as you. He extended his hand. No hard feelings. Preston hesitated, then accepted the handshake. No hard feelings, but I'll hold you to that promise. After Jenkins departed, Preston stood motionless behind the counter, the man's words echoing in his mind. It's clear to everyone in town that you care for the widow. And she for you. Was it so obvious? Had he been fooling himself that their relationship remained purely practical? More importantly, was Jenkins right about Tabitha's feelings? The questions followed him through the day and on the ride home. He found Tabitha in the kitchen, preparing to leave, her saddlebags already packed. You're early, she noted, glancing up from the list she was writing. I've made a stew for tomorrow and there's bread for the morning. Ellie's exercises are going well, he can nearly make a fist now. Jenkins came to the store today, Preston said without preamble. Tabitha stiffened. What did he want? To apologize. He admitted he was trying to pressure you into selling your business. I'm not surprised. She folded the list carefully. He's made offers before, though usually not preceded by threats. He also said something else. Preston removed his hat, turning it in his hands much as Jenkins had done earlier. He said it's clear to everyone that there's something between us. The color that rose in Tabitha's cheeks confirmed what Preston had barely dared hope. People always speculate, she said, but her voice lacked conviction. Tabitha. He took a step closer, heartened when she didn't retreat. Is there truth to it? She looked up at him, vulnerability and strength mingled in her expression. Would it matter if there were? Our arrangement ends next week. It would matter very much. He set his hat aside. Because I find myself dreading the end of our arrangement for reasons that have nothing to do with business. Hope flickered in her eyes. Preston, I care for you, he said simply. More than I expected to care for anyone again after Emma. It's caught me by surprise and I don't rightly know what to do about it. Tabitha's hands trembled slightly as she smoothed her apron. I've developed feelings for you as well, she admitted quietly, and for Ellie, but I've been telling myself it's foolish. We've known each other barely 6 weeks. My parents knew each other 3 weeks before they married, Preston said. They had 40 good years together. Are you comparing us to your parents? A smile tugged at her lips. I'm saying time isn't always the best measure. He took her hands in his, encouraged when she didn't pull away. I know your character, Tabitha. Your kindness, your intelligence, your strength. I know how you care for Ellie, how you run your business, how you face down men like Jenkins without flinching. And I know you, she replied softly. Your devotion to your son, your integrity, your determination to honor your promises, even your stubbornness when you're working too hard. They stood close now, hands linked between them. "I'm not asking for promises today," Preston said. "Only that we don't end what's beginning here. That we allow ourselves to see where this might lead." Tabitha's amber eyes searched his. "People will talk even more. Let them," he smiled. "I find I don't mind so much anymore." A noise from the doorway made them both turn. Illy stood there, eyes wide with hope. "Are you going to marry Mrs. Davis, Pa?" he asked. Preston coughed in embarrassment while Tabitha pressed a hand to her mouth to hide a smile. "That's getting ahead of things, son," Preston managed. "Mrs. Davis and I are just discussing, extending our arrangement." "But you might marry her someday," Illy persisted. Preston met Tabitha's gaze, finding amusement and something warmer there. "If Mrs. Davis is willing and if we find our feelings grow in that direction, then yes, someday." Illy whooped with joy, his healing arm forgotten as he launched himself at them both. "I knew it. I've been praying for it." "Have you now?" Tabitha laughed, steadying him. "Since when?" "Since you fixed my arm and made Pa smile again." Illy looked between them with a child's simple certainty. "You belong here." The statement hung in the air, a truth all three of them felt but had approached from different angles. "Perhaps I do," Tabitha said softly. The next 4 weeks brought change to all their lives. With mutual feelings acknowledged, Preston and Tabitha proceeded cautiously but with purpose. Their business arrangement officially concluded with Illy's splint removal, but Tabitha continued visiting the ranch twice weekly. Preston escorted her to church on Sundays, making their courtship public. Fort Stanton's rumor mill buzzed with approval. Tabitha was well liked, and everyone agreed Preston Forrester had been alone too long. Even Jenkins, true to his word, spoke well of them both. By mid-June, when summer heat shimmered across the land, Preston found himself standing nervously in Tabitha's back room, hat in hand, while she finished closing the store for the day. "I have something to ask you," he said when she joined him. Tabitha's smile was knowing. "Do you now?" "It's about the future." He set his hat aside and took her hands in his. "Illy's right, you know, you do belong with us." "I've come to believe that too," she admitted. "Then marry me." The words came out simpler than he'd rehearsed, but truer for their simplicity. "Be my wife, Illy's mother, my partner in everything." Joy illuminated her face. "Yes, with all my heart, yes." Their first kiss was gentle, a seal on promises spoken and unspoken. When they parted, Preston rested his forehead against hers. "I never expected to find love again." "Nor I." Her fingers traced the line of his jaw. "Life has surprising gifts even after loss." "When shall we marry?" he asked. "Soon," she answered. "Before summer's end, I think. Time enough to make proper arrangements, but not so long that people question our intentions." Preston laughed. "Always practical. It's one of the things I love about you." "And you?" Her eyes sparkled. "What do you bring to this marriage besides cattle and a messy account book?" "Devotion," he answered seriously. "To you for as long as we both shall live." The look she gave him then, full of promise and tenderness, assured Preston that their future together would indeed be blessed. They married on the first Saturday in August, in Fort Stanton's small church. The entire town turned out for the celebration, which spilled from the church into the street and continued well into evening. Illy stood proudly at his father's side, face shining with happiness as Tabitha became his new mother. By year's end, Tabitha had sold the general store to a young couple from Colorado and moved permanently to the Circle F. Under her influence, the ranch house expanded with a new bedroom and proper kitchen. The account books balanced, showing modest profit that promised better in years to come. In the spring of 1880, almost exactly a year after Illy's fateful fall, Tabitha gave birth to their daughter, Sarah Emma Forrester, named for both grandmothers. Illy, now 9 and fully recovered, appointed himself special protector to his baby sister. "She looks like you," Preston whispered to Tabitha as they watched their children together, Illy carefully showing the baby a wooden horse similar to the one Tabitha had given him during his recovery. "She has your eyes," Tabitha countered, leaning against her husband's solid strength. "And hopefully your steady nature rather than my stubbornness." "I wouldn't mind a bit of your stubbornness in her," Preston chuckled. "It served you well." Life settled into new rhythms for the expanded family. The ranch thrived under their joint management, with Tabitha bringing her business acumen to complement Preston's practical ranching knowledge. 2 years after Sarah's birth, they welcomed a son, James Thomas Forrester, completing their family. Fort Stanton grew alongside them, the territory moving steadily toward statehood. Old adversaries like Harold Jenkins became unlikely friends. He stood godfather to young James and eventually married the widowed schoolteacher, surprising everyone including himself with late-life domesticity. On a warm evening in the summer of 1885, 7 years after Illy's broken arm had first brought them together, Preston and Tabitha sat on their porch watching their children play in the yard. Illy, now 14 and nearly as tall as his father, supervised his 5-year-old sister and 3-year-old brother in a game of his own invention. "You ever think about how differently things might have turned out?" Tabitha asked, her hand comfortable in Preston's. "If Illy hadn't fallen that day?" Preston considered the question. "I expect we'd have met eventually. Fort Stanton isn't that big. But would you have noticed me? Would I have seen past that grim exterior you wore like armor? Fate would have found another way," he said with conviction. "Some things are meant to be." Tabitha smiled, watching Illy swing little James high in the air while Sarah demanded her turn. "Your son broke his arm and a widow said you'll heal, but let your pa rest too. Who could have guessed where those words would lead us?" Preston brought her hand to his lips. "To right where we belong." As twilight deepened over the New Mexico landscape, casting long shadows across the land they'd built together, neither Preston nor Tabitha doubted the truth of those words. From unexpected beginnings, a child's accident, a widow's compassion, a rancher's exhaustion had grown a love story as enduring as the mountains that guarded their horizon and as boundless as the western sky above them.